Hello, hello, hi. We'll actually be with you in just a moment. We're trying to get caffeinated so that we can get through this. Maybe you understand the feeling. It's the third day, isn't it? Yes. Oh, my. Tom is helping us out with this, because he's just won the German Book Prize. Isn't that incredible?
Well, our author won it, yeah.
Well, in this room, we're going to say Tom won it.
Yeah.
No, it's fantastic. It's really, really wonderful, and it's something. In fact, now that I've brought that up, I am still Porter Anderson, by the way. After all of this time we've been here together, editor-in-chief of Publishing Perspectives, sometimes Punishing Perspectives, and we are the news medium of Frankfurt. Frankfurter Buchmesse created us about 10 years ago. And our mission is international publishing news. We're online, we're free to read every day, and I hope that you'll come and see us online whenever you can. We're very glad you're here. I'm very glad to have these panelists, and as long as we have mentioned this wonderful thing that's happened with Klett-Cotta, Tom's house, can you talk to us just a little bit, Tom? I mean, I know this has just happened a few days ago, but what is the impact long-term for a house that's independent and may not as often see this kind of success as some of the big ones? At least we think that's the way it goes. Yeah.
Well, I mean, of course, first of all, there are better sales now, but this is definitely not what you want to hear, but on the long term, there are two perspectives, I would say. The one thing is that the prestige, the agents, the booksellers, the book critics, German book, they changed the view a little bit on the company, on Klett-Cotta. Right. Of course, that helps. But I always try to emphasize that it's more about what it changed for the people in the publishing house, because I think it's more important to give ourselves the idea what we did in the last years was good. Right. And that was the right way, and it was this is the good direction, and also I don't know how many of you are working in a publishing house, but the public or like people, book critics or whatever, they see the author and then maybe the publisher or even maybe an editor. But success in a publishing house is a very, very social thing. So everybody is part of a huge system of communication, and everybody who works in the publishing house is part of this kind of success. So what I'm now doing in the last couple of days is try to communicate into my colleagues at Klett-Cotta that everybody is part of this success, and that helps for the future most, I would say so.
Sorry.
Mic drop.
We call that a mic drop. This early in the morning.
Yeah. I talk and you drop the mic.
This is why Nelleke's with us. This is Nelleke Geel from Amsterdam. Wonderful house there that we're going to hear about. And then this is Nita van Moltke, who is one of the co-founders of this incredible new venture in New York City. It stood us all on our ears when we found out that she, Madeline McIntosh, and Don Weisman were doing this together. It's called Authors Equity. And I want Nina to give us a good explanation of what it is, because you'll find the centricity of the author in this fascinating. It's really an incredible concept. But I love what you're saying, Tom, because the whole thing of bringing it back home and letting this support the local team is so important. And I think, that there are probably some companies not as good at doing this as you. It probably gets pinned on the author or pinned on the publisher, and everybody else was just happened to be there at the time. But you're right, it is a group effort, always. And does this mean you're having to pay for a lot of champagne? Is that how you do this?
Well, we have champagne anyway, all the time. You need to be prepared.
We have to work there. Oh, that's great. Our format today is, I hope, very comfortable for everyone. Because we all have some knowledge of each other and because we all respect each other, we're going to take a little less structured approach, and rather than each person standing and deliver, we're probably going to do a good deal more just conversational back and forth, because these are all folks working at a very high level in independent publishing, which I think is important to hear from. at times, because these days independent is becoming more and more important, and independents are being snapped up quite frequently too, which shows you that the corporate side of the industry is watching very carefully. And as it looks for growth ways, growth means, growth pathways, it turns to the independent world, which gives you a good idea of the value being created in that world. I want to start us off, just briefly, with an interesting piece of text that Nelleke gave us a couple of years ago in this room. The room looked very different at that time. It was set up in a different way, but it was this same room. And she was talking to us about the extraordinary experience she was having of having become the Dutch publisher of Hilary Mantel. And it was amazing what she was having to deal with, and the strain. I mean, it sounds like the best thing ever, right, that could happen to an independent house, and a young one, and it is, as she's saying. But at that point, there were many, many stress points, right, to deal with, obviously. And yet, she wanted to go back to the basics, and this is what she wrote and said to us. To go back to the essential matters of being an indie: 1, know your authors personally. 2, know the booksellers personally. 3, scale. Find the right equilibrium between keeping it personal and curated, but not too vulnerable. And don't think that you'll have that achieved in 3. 4, distinguish yourself in an overflowing market. How? Being an indie is being an original. Look to where others don't go. Get off the grid more. Be pragmatic and skip auctions because you can't afford them. If you get the chance to do some guerrilla marketing, do it. Good covers help. The photographer Tessa Postumer de Boer, help me say that. Beautiful name. Right here. Tessa Postumer de Boer.
Tessa Postumer de Boer.
That's the person. Famous photographer. I love the name. Who made portraits of the Cromwell trilogy. We were talking about that in relation to Hilary Mantel, of course. Couldn't stop and portrayed all of Henry's wives, plus Thomas More. We had just found out our Cardinal Wolsey model when the first lockdown started. This was the pandemic era, of course. And she did manage to sell a bunch of the portraits. Good for her. That's the kind of alliance I like. Number 5, balance your acquisitions list. They can't all be Judith Shalansky's, although you don't have to go as far as 50 Shades of Grey either to make a living. Limited overhead, remember? 6, stick to the plan. Be flexible, but stick to the plan. Don't try to be something you're not, which is easier said than done, since trendy topics have an increasing leverage over what is reviewed, because social media have an increasing leverage over what is discussed in talk shows, and newspapers and books are so often in dire need of a bit of attention in order to sell or sell enough. Definitely scary sometimes, sticking to plans. 7, have the financial stuff in order as well as you can. An indie can't afford nasty financial surprises, less in the first 5 years. And finally, be confident that your lucky strike will come. And the last thing she wrote was, can you hear I'm talking to myself? I found this wonderful. It stuck with me. For little parts of this come to me all the time over the years since we first heard it, because rarely do you hear somebody who is in medias res going through the experience and discovering what these basic tenets are. It can be quite daunting, obviously, and talking of nasty surprises, there are some, but also wonderful moments, too. You win the German Book Prize. It's incredible. So what we're going to do now is I'd like each of our guests to tell us a little bit about the house that they are with, what they're doing, and then we'll all start talking about the issues and try to get them to tell us the most dreadful things that are going on for them, because that's always the most interesting. But to look at challenges, I think I'm saying it the funny way, but really what we find we learn the most about in almost any of the panels that we do here at the Publishing Perspectives Forum is the challenges, not the great things. The wonderful moments are wonderful moments, but really where you learn stuff is when things get strange. So we'll look for strangeness along the way. Yeah. Will you start us off, Nelleke, since we've heard from you already? And me playing you?
Good morning, everybody. I'm pretty pleased, actually, with with what I wrote.
Not bad.
It's
held up.
coherent, right? It's,
Yeah, no?
it makes
You
sense.
really did write it. It's right.
No, I think you mixed it up. It was a totally different person.
That was yesterday's panel. I'm sorry.
Strangeness. Okay, so first I'll tell a little bit. So we have our 5th anniversary this year, literally last month, and then 5 years ago. We published the very first book, which was Nino Haratischvili, which has definitely an echo here in Germany, I would say, and will come to the States too. So that was already a lucky strike. Obviously, Hilary Mantel was a very lucky strike, obviously too, because that first COVID year, it was so much needed. Well, we talked about that 3 years ago. So now we're here for 5 years, and you are looking for strangeness. Well, again, the words of what's his name, Michael of Text Publishing in Australia. Michael Hayward. That he said to me a very long time ago when we just started. Yeah, you just enjoy it while it lasts with few authors, because it's going to grow whether you like it or not. And that's kind of the situation that we're in now. That you have to look for new voices, etc. You also know that the authors that you have already on the list are writing, will deliver, who knows, next year, 2 years, maybe next week. You never quite know how that is. And meanwhile, you have a program to fill. So you're starting to become in that place where things maybe not become strange, but tricky perhaps, in terms of workload, accumulating too many authors too fast. For more authors, you need more personnel, obviously. I read an article about the authors' equity and how that is arranged with a big group of freelancers actually around every project, kind of designated freelancers, if you could say so. I think that's wonderful. Fascinating. And perhaps one of the few sustainable forms also left for indies that are not as big or around for so long as Klett-Cotta is, for example. Still nothing strange, really. I will get back to the strange things later, perhaps. So this is the stage that we're in now. 5 years, wonderful. It's going well. Hilary Mantel has died. That is very, very terrible on a personal level. I was good friends with her. That sort of thing happens, and now we're going on to the phase that we're little by little scaling up, but that you still don't have the apparatus to, you're constantly in between these, we should actually have more hands to work with, because we have that many authors, but you cannot always afford it because of that financial thing. Beware of your finances, etc. So it's wonderful. I still love it really so much, even though I'm very tired right now. But yeah, it's in plain development, and I'm curious what it will bring in the next 2 to 3 years. I mean, normally you say after 3 years, let's evaluate a little bit. This time, because of the COVID years, you can just easily add an extra 2 to have some sense of what it can be or what it is at some point.
And especially because your initiation was during the COVID period.
You
didn't even have a ramp before then. You were just right into it.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, true.
So you've never really seen the thing under running normal conditions until now. A chance to get there, and you're not there yet. Right?
23 was actually the first normal year.
Wow.
For us, that counted as a first normal year.
Yeah.
We were already 4 years in business, pretty much.
Yeah, my Lord.
Well, anyway.
Yeah, no, this is very interesting. I think it's a good start to where we all can be talking. Nina, because Nelleke was mentioning the freelance surround that you've created is so interesting, and we're all watching with fascination. Can you tell us a little bit about Authors Equity for those who don't know it yet?
Sure, I'm delighted to. Hi, everybody. So we're in the toddler stage of a publisher. We just launched 7 months ago. We started about a year ago to set up the company, but we're really very new. We only have 5 titles coming this year. But we moved faster than we thought we would, because I think there is a demand, as we have found. So just a little bit of background. We're 3 co-founders who worked in traditional big publishing for a long time. And we've seen big publishing becoming bigger and bigger, which makes a lot of business sense, right? You get synergies, you can leverage your fixed assets, you make more profit, you make it more efficient. But we've also seen over the years how on the other hand, the market has become much more fragmented. So with online, and more direct, so with online channels being 70% of sales in the US, between physical and digital formats, and the media platforms have disseminated completely, or almost completely. And the author is really communicating more directly with consumers and readers these days. As a big publisher, it's very hard to support authors in that way. So we asked ourselves, how would we structure a company in this century? How would we set that up? And yesterday I was trying to explain the model in sort of a longer way, and then somebody said, so you're actually a producer? And I said, oh, yes, we're actually seeing ourselves more as a producer than a traditional publisher. So rather than paying advances for full control and copyright and all decision-making and having more of a parent-child relationship, that was another, somebody quoted that, we're treating it more as an adult-to-adult relationship and as a support to the author in a joint venture. So we're really, our principles are partnership, community, aligned interests, and financial upside, in the sense that we're going into business with an author. So we're supporting them from the beginning. We're assembling a team. So, this is a thing we thought about early on. If you have a limited staff as a small publisher, you can really only focus on very specific categories. So instead of doing that, we have built a talent network of really amazing editors, designers, and publicists, so the creative team, that we assemble with the author. So we're signing an author, and we're really building a business around each author. And the author has a say in virtually everything, including the team they want to work with, which is very powerful and makes for a very different way of working. And it helps to leverage cost to some degree. And so, and on the back end, we're providing the full-scaled services through distribution agreement with SNS. So we have the scale. The big companies have to leverage their assets, so they provide that service to small publishers, which is great, because that used to be the big advantage of a big publisher, and now you can tap into that. So that's, in essence, our model. What's also really nice to see, and by the way, I could totally copy your 10 points of this is what makes an indie publisher completely. What is interesting to see as a small publisher, the other thing you can do is build community amongst the authors. So not just the house, in our case. That is obviously one of the things that drew all of us to publishing, probably. But we see the authors connecting now in a way that is much easier to facilitate in an intimate, sort of smaller circle, and creating relationships and cross-promoting each other organically. Not that we say, James Clear, please put Seth Godin on your newsletter, and these are some of our authors. They just do it because they want to. So that is something that I think for us is a huge, interesting thing we want to pursue more.
That is very cool. I love that, because really there is very little community most of the time. If anything, there's a good bit of hostility and suspicion and things. We all live this way. But that is a fascinating outcome that I hadn't heard. I heard a funny thing too. I was talking with Madeline a few months ago. Madeline McIntosh, for those of you who are not aware, was for years the Penguin Random House USA CEO, and a very, very highly admired person in the role. And she said to me that there was a point at which all of you were having to learn new tasks that, of course, someone in the house, in a house the size of Penguin Random House, was doing all the time. Maybe I'm making this one up because it's not what she said, but something like metadata. How are you getting that to get into the right place at the right time, right? And that was fascinating, because you do suddenly start at a different level entirely, and yet with all of this great experience that comes in. Yeah. Is there, just talking of the challenges, more than strangeness, is there a large part, is there one component of the model, as you've conceived it, that now the three of you are looking at and thinking, maybe that wasn't the best idea. Maybe we should tweak this or something. Is there something that's really surprised you that way?
I'd say we're still a little too early to have major regrets because we're having so much fun and it seems to be working. I think we're in a similar stage, as you said, Nelleke, in the sense of thinking about the list and how selective should we be, because as you become, as you sort of get on the map and you have some success and some authors and more authors reach out to you and want to work with you, for us, like even though we're a little bit more scalable in the sense of maybe working with freelance teams, they still need to be managed. So we're in a very high touch model. Like we're very involved with the authors. I mean, we rushed back from a dinner yesterday at 10 to have a cover meeting with an author. I mean, it's just we're very, very involved, all of us, about 10 people now. And so you have to, like our model lives and dies with a good experience for the author. So we can't scale too fast because we need to preserve that. So this is like, you want to grow, and yet you need to do it at the right pace. So the pacing, I think, right now is on our minds of like how fast can you grow, which ones are the authors that are the right partners, and how selective are you going to be? So I think we're right now in that phase of evaluating that mostly. But otherwise, I would say, I mean, of course, I guess the one thing that we come up against is like we're a very, we can break the rules because we have no rules, which is so liberating because being in a big corporation for many years, you have to say no a lot because you put a lot at risk, right? You have to protect the backlist. It's a very different business model and nothing wrong with it. It's very stable. Right. But oftentimes you see the author asking a question of, can't we do this differently? And you have to say no, and you feel like it's actually the right thing for the author. And now we can be much more flexible because we're also author by author. We don't have one rule for us. So that's liberating, but also we still work with SNS, a sales team, and the retailers, and so we have to kind of square the circle sometimes because we want to move really fast sometimes, and then we have to count on a lot of patience and grace from our partners. But so, I mean, we know that side, so that's just what we have to deal with.
No, that makes sense. I had a chance to speak with Arnaud Noury yesterday here in the forum, and it was fascinating because I asked him at one point during the 12, 18 years that he was running Hachette Livre, which is huge, of course. I said, were there moments there, Arnaud, when you were thinking, boy, I wish we could do this a different way for our authors or for anyone in the company, if we could just change this? And he said that, interestingly, no, because at the time he was involved in running such a massive company and such a big major, he couldn't think of anything other than the way it's done, right? It is such a complex system and requires so much consistency across great distances and in so many countries that you really don't have a lot of room to do it. And he had 3 years after he was no longer with Hachette Livre. And during the 3 years, it came to him that he had all of these interests in trying to make something go differently. His model is not unlike, in many ways, not unlike Authors Equity. I think maybe the main difference that he was pointing out was that in France, editors bring along authors with them. And so he's learning to cultivate and talk with the editors and see who might be available attached to a given editor, right? But I think this is interesting too, because you may have found this too, Nina, when you were in the heat of the corporate world. Were you thinking of wanting to do this kind of thing, or did it sort of take getting out of it before you could see another way?
No, I mean, this is an idea that has been long brewing, and we've kind of lived in this, with this tension as senior managers, where sometimes you understand the side of the author very well, and you wish you could grant them their wishes, but you know that if you would say, oh yeah, we're just going to publish only print and no ebook, that wouldn't work because then all the other authors may ask for that. Like it's a very, you have a big business to protect. It's really like a protection mindset, and what other authors may ask if you allow it once. If you were to say, yeah, we'll pay you 70% royalties in this case. It just doesn't work because then all the other big authors may ask for that too, and all the agents,
I was going to say,
are
and
involved.
agents.
So it is. I mean, it makes sense that you have to say no, but it also became increasingly frustrating for us.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Now, Tom, talk to us about Klett-Cotta, because it is a development of a different kind from these two. Tell us how you come to be where you are and what started it.
But first to get back to what you said and but also what you said before is, I had to think about this, the quotation from the Italian novel Il Gattopardo, so Italy, Guest of Honor, where it's something like, if we want to keep what we are, we have to change everything. So, and this is something I find quite interesting. So if we want to stick to the plan, we have to find new ways and change stuff. And this is all about like what we should talk here and at the book fair, that what do we have to change to keep the values, to keep the ideas which are connecting us all. Because there are many, many values which are totally connectable to everybody. I know personally in the international book business. And I think we share this, and then there are more conservative people who try to keep the values, which is also positive, but then there are progressive people who try new stuff, new business models, and we have to collaborate between those probably very different approaches, but I think this is to keep the industry, and that has always been the power of book business,
right,
that we had both ideas, because book business is one of the oldest industries. So the book, you look at the book now and look at the book 500 years ago, and it looks quite the same. Yeah. So this is actually a very conservative thing. So yeah, and this is also coming back to maybe Klett-Cotta, and Klett-Cotta is a very old publishing house. Right. It's the oldest German. It's nearly 400 years old, and Michael Klett bought actually Cotta in the 70s, so he ran the company for 30 years. I'm running now the company for 17 years. Right. This is all a long time, and this is all about sticking to a plan, This is all about having sustainability, and I believe very much in sustainability. And I think the question about also independent publishing versus corporate publishing is which model helps you to work sustainable or to stick to the plan. Where can you, what is better? And that is a very complicated question, because corporate publishing, there's a lot of structure, a lot of technology, a lot of money very often, and that helps probably. But independent publishing can make you more flexible to stick to the plan if you have to move to stick to the plan, if you have to. So I think this is the power of being independent, whatever that means, I think there are super independent people in very corporate houses. So so this, I think this is, this is something I think about, how flexible do we have to be to stick to our plan as a publisher, but also as an industry.
It's interesting hearing you say this, because one of the things Neri said was that he looks at this that he's doing as disruption. He's very interested in the disruptive idea of it, meaning that bringing together people he wants to work with into his collective. Les Nouveaux Editeurs, I can't say it the way he wanted me to, and he laughed at me for that. But he was very clear on that in his mind, at least at this early stage, he thinks of this as a disruptive movement. And I'm sure that he sees Authors' Equity as being that as well. And yet one of the things I think you're wisely saying, Tom, and we heard this in Nelleke's comments, about sticking to the plan. There is danger in looking for just disruption for the idea of disruption. Yeah, and the kind of evolution we're talking about is care. There's the plan and the form.
And
talk about that.
The form is probably the thing that is up for debate and changes.
Right.
Whereas the original plan of building this author's house,
right.
But of course the house changes form probably in order to survive, etc.
Yeah.
400 years. I mean, you must have changed forms in the course of those 400 years while sticking to the plan of the idea of what Klett-Cotta was supposed to be in the very early beginnings.
Of course, but I would say, like, disruption, it's a word, like, it's a strong word. And it's right, it's okay, but I think what in other industry, when you say disruption, is something totally different than what we talk about. I mean, this is what he does is, well, yeah, it sounds cool to be disruptive, the business punk or whatever. I don't see him technically as something, but anyway. But I think this is also, in a way, what you do is extremely, but it's so interesting, it's so important to have people who go forward, try out something, so we can learn. And also, it's not like copying specific things, but it's about the definition of publishing, actually. It's about the boundaries between self-publishing and publishing, and about all the royalty models you do, and this is so interesting for me, and I was really looking forward to meet you, because I think we have to learn, and not to copy it, not to change everything, but maybe to change something, and this is surviving, changing form is life, and
it's evolution.
I mean, I also think it's not disruption in the sense that everything is wrong at all. Like, I mean, the big publishing is doing an amazing job for many authors, and indie publishers are doing an amazing job that have been around for a long time. It's really just it's an amplification of a business model opportunity that I think has opened up in the last 10 years probably, and more. And it's not for every author. Like, not every author is better served that way or wants to work in this collaborative way. Some others are very happy in the way they are. So it's not so much one is better than the other. It's just different, and I think it's an open playing field to experiment right now.
And at the beginning, when I talked about the German Book Prize, I said about the team, and that it's a long time working with a team, and the team understands that we are doing good. And then you said that you work with freelancers mostly, so that could be like the opposite. But then you have to start thinking, this is the starting point. So you have to think, okay, where do I need a team? Where do I need people who work with us for the next 25 years? And where do I need the flexibility or the scale, the possibility of a scale of doing more or less, and this is a starting point. This is not it's not an opposition. It's sometimes you need it, sometimes not, and yeah.
Maybe just to add one thing. So our freelance model, I think, is also timely, because a lot of the amazing editors just don't want to work in big houses anymore. After COVID, there's been a big shift in like how you want to work, and not everybody again, but there are enough great talents, and design and publicity has always been a freelance business anyways, that I think that's also sort of a timely thing. The other thing that we're doing is to have them participate in the title profit, so that there's a real alignment, like, everyone is so invested, and you can celebrate, everyone feels part of the team. That is something I always felt in corporate publishing was lacking. Like, if you're an editor who bought an incredible book that goes on to sell millions, you still get, maybe you get a bonus one year, but like, you're not really directly participating in the upside. Or if you're an editor who buys books that really don't make any money, you also just get your salary. So I think it's just, not that is the key motivator. We're not in this business for that reason, probably most of us. There's more money to be made in other industries, but it's an interesting dynamic where if you feel you participate, it just creates that even more, that alignment that is there anyways, but I think it amplifies it.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up that aspect of it, because I was intrigued when it first came across and we were learning that, because one of the things that you're talking about today is the authors and a community sense and everything. If you have some skin in the game, you're probably more interested in your fellow author at that company and making sure things go well for that author. How can you support that author? Because all the boats float, right? When somebody's doing well. I love that concept, because that investment, that sense of I'm in it with you, is really quite cool.
And in the long term.
In the long term, right, exactly. You have to be sensible to that, like you are in the stock market. But it's fascinating.
Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm curious about what amount of books are you then aiming for? Say 3 years from now, it's kind of established, etc. What is doable? Because definitely, if you have the designated teams, I can also imagine. Okay, does anybody actually keep track of all this? Because there's this little nucleus of author, author. So all these projects together. What is, for the three of you, say, the volume that you want to reach in the end, or is it basically also limitless in a way?
Well, I mean, that's what I was referencing. Like the pacing is we want to be very selective.
Yeah.
So I think we've signed about 20 authors. We're probably going to publish between 15 and 20 next year. And we learn as we go. So I think we were conscious of not overextending ourselves, because we'd rather go a little slower in the next year before we scale. It is, we're getting better and better at, we had to set up the plumbing, so to speak, of how do we actually get all those books through the pipeline? How do we set up that management of basically the key producer and who's involved and what does it take? So I think it's scalable, but we have no intention of publishing thousands of books. It has to be. I don't have the exact answer, because I think I will know a lot more a year from now. Yeah. And right now it's working, but we're going to be selective.
Yeah, you'll find out along the way. Okay, this is manageable. This is wonderful. Everybody that is in this author's equity still has a clear sense of. Those are all the projects, and we kind of keep it at that. Well, and then maybe at some point you're also totally, used to the new model that you can take on more projects. Well, as those things go,
Thanks for
it's
the
kind
advice.
of organic
It's true.
growth.
Tom, how many books do you put out a year on average?
160 books.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're the big indie.
Let's give Nelleke a pause, you see. That's huge.
Per year?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because everybody loves you when you do fewer books. So everybody, like the authors, if you tell them we only have few books in this part of the program, I mean, so nobody really wants anybody to do a lot of books. Not the book says, oh, that's too much, I don't want nobody, but yeah, and we all talk also on the business, on the level of our whole book business. We say, there are too many in Germany, at least, too many books, too many books on the market, and so on. Yeah. And of course, and you say it's a lot, but you know that a publishing house one of the imprints or one of the publishing of a corporate group like Holzbrink or Bonnier's or Random House is doing 4 or 5 times more. So it's compared to what we call indie. But I mean, we could talk maybe 3 hours about the concept of independence. What does it actually mean? Yeah. But yeah. Anyway, what we call that, this is relatively a high number of books. But yeah, I mean, we have a bigger team.
And you're a big indie.
And we are very, very. So we have a fantasy list where we publish Tolkien. Then we have a academic list of psychoanalysis. Then we have a highbrow non-fiction list, literature, and so yeah. So it's but it's totally true. We have this staff, we have this real estate, we have all of that, and we cannot say, okay, let's do a half of the books, so that is a kind of flexibility which comes through the scale of a publishing house, and we don't have that, and this is
unless half the books would sell twice as much. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, this is it's always that balance of do you really go in and try to maximize and are successful, and that's never predictable.
But the thing is, it grows. I mean, in the end, you're just, I'll not say stuck, but in the end, you're just with the whole growth thing. Okay, we're up to 160 now in order to meet, say, the standard that we need to reach. And of course, it's such a tombola. It's so unsure what will sell and what will bring any money and what won't, etc. Although maybe with some lists, some of your non-fiction lists are probably more stable. You can project much better
Yeah.
What
No,
that will bring in per year?
I am totally a fan of a diversified publishing of this. Very different because sometimes you need this, sometimes that, and I think the most at the moment most successful German publishing houses are successful through reduction. Because they totally focus on a specific kind of literature, for example. But I don't like it because I don't see it as a sustainable business model because you never know. You need to have the different kinds of books you do. And I mean, this is funny that you said, okay, you can do 50% if they sell and well, I mean, this is the joke. Everybody who works at Random House, also that all the controllers say, well, this is a fantastic program, but why did you do all this unsuccessful books? I would do only the bestsellers. I think you should only publish the bestsellers. I mean, that was a joke like 100 years ago, and that's still a joke.
Famous last line. Why don't you buy bestsellers?
But you're right. There've been some interesting little experiments. Jamie Bing at Canongate announced at the Future Book Conference a few years ago that he was tired of putting out so many books and that he was going to do one book for each employee that he had in the company. And he did go through with that. I did not get a report on how it went. But it was interesting because there was a little time. S. Fisher was doing some work in this regard too, trying to cut things back and scale back because they felt they were doing more than they could market. Right? That's often one of the most upsetting parts. Yeah. But you're right. I mean, really, you just want to do the good books.
And it's also, I mean, there's a reason, because for a controller, he sees the number of books you sell minus the loss you make. But the public, like booksellers, they don't see unsuccessful books. It's just the number of successful books. They don't see it because
they don't have them in their shops.
Yeah, they don't see that. So if they like a publishing house or if they're interested in the new, it's just the number of the books, the successful books. So if you have a huge list, the probability of success grows. Yeah. And this is the thing what I tell to my people. We don't work on success, because this is also a lucky thing at the end, but probability of success is something very real. It's realer than success. You can work on that.
Probability of success.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
Well, your rationale needs to be good.
Yeah.
I mean, one bestseller on 20 failures is still less of a problem than one bestseller on 60 failures. The thing is, what is the bestseller?
Nelleke, how do you pick? I mean, what is your selection criteria? How many do you publish?
I'm sorry.
How do you go about selecting authors, or how many you want to publish?
Oh, next year we do about 17, 18 new titles. Some mid-prizes, etc. But we have a fairly good rationale as to what sells, what earns back its money, what sells simply a lot more and pays the bills. You have to be that pragmatic. And what doesn't make money at all, or in the end you lose because of all the out-of-costs, etc. I would like to get to, say, 2022. I found out in previous years at other publishing houses, you still have a wonderful control of span in terms of what do you publish, who are those authors, you try to know them, and the probability of having a breakout book, a few that earn back their money easily, and then some people works that you lose money on, but that you have on the list for other reasons, that hopefully still works, and that is for me a lovely amount of books to handle, and then little by little, of course, it grows because you're acquiring new authors, etc. But the 2022 for me has always been a wonderful amount of titles to do per year, new ones, and not talking about what you recycle in other forms. Yeah, and I hope I can sustain that for tiny indie, big indie. Yeah.
This is such a great conversation, and in fact, I'm afraid we're not going to have question time, simply because I was enjoying hearing so much from these folks, and I like it when they ask each other the questions.
Well, let's do the
Makes my
questions.
job so easy.
Why not? Well, can't we do the questions?
Do
I'm
the- well-
interested to hear if there are questions.
We have about 20 seconds. What do you think?
Oh,
Somebody
that's
got a
not
very
much.
fast question.
15.
Oh, we have
15,
10 minutes
14.
left. Yeah. Ooh.
10 minutes left? No, not in this. Well, our next group is coming in, you see. But I would love to thank our panelists. I think this has been such a great conversation. Nina, Nelleke, Tom, and all of you. It's really good to have your interest and to have you with us. Thank you for being with us in the forum, and I hope the rest of your Frankfurt is fantastic. Bye-bye.